to say a few words in relation to this very important issue, Climate Action Plan. And I have to say, Minister, I am concerned that communities and workers affected by the transition seem to have been forgotten in the new climate plan. It fails to even partially reflect the Committee's recommendation on a just transition. It simply ignores the recommendation that an independent Just Transition Task Force be established in order to examine the upcoming challenges of the forthcoming rapid transition. The plan merely refers to a Just Transition review as part of the NESC who are undertaking the research. This is not the appropriate forum to engage communities and workers. The plan also fails to address the central point in the Committee's recommendations that the Just Transition Task Force will need to be applied to other industries and sectors, and not only the challenges faced by the Midlands. And we know, Minister, I am sure you are aware that we will face a huge challenge in that part of the country. Last week, the European Commission highlighted the same failings in Ireland's draft climate report submitted to Brussels last year, emphasising that the government must— now remember, this is the EU, whom we often think are too rigid in the way they address issues in this country, but they state integrate just and fair transition aspects better, notably by providing more details on social, employment and skills impacts of planned policies and measures. And 2, address the impact of the transition on the populations living in carbon-intensive regions. And also 3, complement the approach to addressing energy poverty issues with indicative objectives for reducing energy poverty. And we will have energy poverty out of this, there is no doubt about it. This was precisely the same findings of the Oireachtas Committee on Climate Action. All members, including the Fine Gael party, similarly recommended that the independent task force be established to examine social and employment impacts, training and skill developments, social protection and local economic diversification. And can the Minister clarify the reasons for this categorical failure and commit to amending the plan accordingly? Now let me move for a moment to carbon tax. In relation to the proposal to increase the carbon tax to 2030, Fianna Fáil have been very clear that prior to any target carbon tax increase, the government must introduce specific measures to protect those vulnerable to fuel poverty and ring-fence revenues to assist those not in a position to transition from fossil fuels. And this is, again, a huge issue in many parts of the country. We welcome the recent analysis by the ESRI on this issue and the recent consultation from the Department of Finance. However, can the Minister update the House on the introduction of those measures before Budget 2020, particularly relating to combating energy poverty and supporting the vulnerable households that will be there because of this? And in relation to biodiversity, the House learned last month of the significant environment, economic and health impacts of biodiversity loss and destruction of the natural habitats. The Joint Oireachtas Committee report was also quite clear that several of its recommendations, when implemented, would have a double benefit of reducing emissions and supporting biodiversity, including in the context of a new land use plan, new incentives under CAP, protection of hedgerows, forestry management and peatlands restoration. And thanks to a Fianna Fáil amendment, the link between the two crises were similarly reflected in the Dáil's declaration of a climate and biodiversity emergency in May. However, the importance of biodiversity is largely absent from the new climate plan. And the Minister seemed to suggest that this was an entirely separate issue to be dealt with by the Minister for Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht. Again, Minister, can you confirm that investment for biodiversity protection will be supported, including through the development of a national hedgerow conservation strategy as recommended in the Oireachtas Committee report? Minister, I am sure you agree that if we are to have this massive change in society, and I think we all agree that there has to be some aspect of change, you must bring your people with you. If you haven't the people on your side to implement such change, you won't succeed. And that's why I'm putting specific questions to you today, because they are very important issues. And again, in relation to electric cars, if you look at what the government are proposing, in my view, it's not implementable. It just can't happen.
Thank you.